You know, David Livingstone is one of history's best ever known missionaries. He was a pioneer in the true sense of the word. David Livingstone was greatly used by God to open up the interior of Africa for the gospel. He really was an amazing man. David Livingstone was born in Scotland in 1813. He grew up in a poor home. He started work at the age of 10 at a cotton mill. He worked there for 13 years, 14 hours a day, from 6 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock of the night, and he did that for 6 days a week. This was no doubt part of God's preparation of David Livingstone for his future missionary work. David Livingstone made good use of his time while he was at work. He'd take books along with him to work, including a Bible and a Latin book. He actually won his Bible in a contest where he recited the whole of Psalm 119, that's 176 verses. He mastered Latin by the age of 16, often sitting up until midnight studying by candlelight. His biography says of David Livingstone, he milked every minute out of every day. By the time he was 27, David Livingstone had completed courses in theology and medicine. He applied to the London Missionary Society and was accepted in 1838. His desire was to go to China, but a reverend later approached him with the bad news that he would not be accepted for missionary service because of his faltering speech. David was devastated. But a friend encouraged him, look, all is not lost. He told him that he had overheard someone say of him, when Livingstone walks, he has a very particular stride, solid and determined, not fast, not slow. His stride simply guarantees he is going to get there. He was a determined young man. This stayed with him for life. To Livingstone's surprise, the reverend who broke the bad news to him earlier later had a change of heart, and he was given another chance. In the meantime, however, another setback occurred. The London Missionary Society decided not to send any more missionaries to China at that time because a conflict had broken out between England and China over opium, causing things to become unsettled. Again, Livingstone was disappointed, but God had not deserted him. He still had plans for this zealous young man. A missionary from South Africa told Livingstone that vast areas of Africa's interior were untouched by white men. So David told the mission board that he wanted to go to South Africa, and he requested to do further medical training. The board approved, and in 1840 he began work at a London hospital. There he gained valuable experience in examining and diagnosing a wide range of diseases, including pneumonia, tuberculosis and cancer. This was excellent preparation for his future work in Africa. The time finally came for Livingstone to set sail for the mission field. He returned from London back to Scotland to say goodbye to his family. He caught a steamer to England and then sailed for Africa. In March 1841, at the age of 28, he arrived in Cape Town. He found that some of the missionaries were only ministering among white people. This was not his passion. His desire was to push into unevangelized territory in the north. So in September 1841, he, a fellow missionary, and 2 native Africans began a trek northeast by an ox wagon. While on the mission field, David Livingstone married, and he and his wife were blessed with several children. One of their children, Elizabeth, died after a month from respiratory illness. David Livingstone was separated from his wife for 4 years when she returned to Scotland for the children's education. They were later apart for another 4 years. He in fact did not see his daughter Anna Mary until she was nearly 6 years old. These were some of the costs of the ministry that God had called him to. In 1862, Mary returned to Africa, and her and David were happily reunited. But sadly, in April that year, she contracted river fever and died within 6 days at the age of 41. David Livingstone was devastated, but he pressed on, and what this man achieved is truly remarkable. During his 32 years in the mission field, he walked, crawled, climbed, waded, canoed, boated, rode and was carried over 40,000 miles of rugged territory in a country referred to as the white man's grave. He took notes and made maps every step of the way and told many Africans the good news of Jesus Christ. David Livingstone suffered many trials and hardships. He was once attacked by a lion, leaving 11 punctures in his left arm. He suffered from river fever for 10 years and from recurrent bleeding later on. Towards the end of his life, he lost his front teeth. He also suffered from foot ulcers, lung problems, dysentery, and internal bleeding, and he became emaciated. On April 10 in 1873, this is what he wrote in his diary: "I am pale, bloodless, and weak from bleeding profusely. An artery gives off a copious stream and takes away my strength." David Livingstone died on the 30th of April 1873. Two Africans buried his heart and his internal organs underneath a tree. They preserved his body, wrapped it, and along with some other natives carried it for 8 months to Zanzibar, over 1,000 miles away. On the way, a stranger encouraged them to abandon this body, but they replied, "No, this is a very big man." His body was then shipped to England, where it was buried in Westminster Abbey. David Livingstone's father-in-law said of him, "He sacrificed everything, home, lucrative prospects, and earthly honours, for one grand object: to carry the gospel of the Son of God to the heart of Africa." David Livingstone made such an impact that Africans, even in remote areas, still spoke of him years later. He took up his cross and followed Jesus, making sacrifices to advance the gospel. His sufferings are now behind him, and he abides in the presence of the Lord he so faithfully served. No doubt his reward will be great. May the example of David Livingstone inspire us to live for the Lord Jesus Christ and to advance the cause of the gospel, making whatever sacrifices God calls upon us to make.